GST may well be India's biggest indirect tax reform. Touted as a game changer for the Indian economy, its success is pinned on the technology infrastructure that will bring together the centre and states and nearly 70 lakh taxpayers on a common platform. How will these diverse taxpayers, from the multinational corporates to the small retailer in far flung Indian towns, come together? To learn more about the technology and the complex software systems, we have with us today Mr. Prashant Pillai. He is the country head tax and accounting with Thomson Reuters, the answer company that promises to bring Indian corporates tax compliant. Hello, Mr. Pillai. Welcome to Rubaru.
Thanks for inviting me.
You are a tax professional with Thomson Reuters, and we want to know what is the role of technology in tax compliance.
This is a very interesting question. So technology plays a critical role in many ways, right? Number one, as organizations have become more complex in their structures, their geographic spread, and they're exposed to multiple tax domains, it is really virtually impossible to keep track of all the changing landscape of tax. Tax regulations change very frequently. Tax rates keep changing very frequently. There are different compliances that have to be done with different regulatory authorities across the world. And that has actually led a number of corporations across the world to start thinking around how can tax technology really help them keep pace with the change, enable them to have more certainty around their tax determination, and also more certainty about how they are going to be complying with multiple tax authorities. Tax technology is also very important from a perspective of making sure that you have the right audit defense when you're subject to audit, internal or external, to make sure that the corporation is very certain about how tax has been computed and complied with across the world.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it true that the more complicated the tax system, more the need for technology?
Absolutely, it is. It is. So, we deal with a number of complex tax regimes across the world, and we've seen that the regimes where the taxation system is complex, either because of the multiplicity of changes during the course of a year, or multiplicity of tax jurisdictions within a country, that causes a serious challenge for corporations, and that's when technology becomes even more relevant.
How would a corporate bring in technology to comply?
So I think there are different ways to look at this. Again, it depends on whether you talk of direct tax, you talk of indirect tax. Let me give you an example of indirect tax, right? And in indirect tax, let's assume you're a very large multinational corporation. You have operations in 30, 40 countries across the world, right? Firstly, it'll be extremely challenging for you to keep pace with the changes that occur in the tax regulation as well as in the rates, right? So that is a big challenge. So one of the things technology can do is help you stay abreast of the changing regulations in all of those 30 jurisdictions. So that is content. It can help you stay on track of all the rate changes that have occurred and which are relevant to you across those jurisdictions. Now, the important thing about compliance is that if you can accurately determine and ensure that all the transactions in your ecosystem are being taxed at the correct rate, then that is the starting point for making sure there's good compliance. Right.
And when we speak of technology, we are referring to software systems?
Yeah, it's software systems. Traditionally, when we talk of technology, we talk of technology as software systems. But interestingly, one thing that we've done over several years, and that's a very core strength for us, is we embed content into the software, right? So to give you an example, if a company were to use a software from us to calculate their indirect tax, that wouldn't just be a piece of software that will apply the rules of calculation to all the transactions, but it will also enable that the content is updated on a regular real-time basis.
Okay.
So if a tax rate changes in Brazil as we speak right now, that content will be updated into their platform so that the transactions will have that particular rate applied from the effective date of that particular change. And that is what is extremely critical to ensure that your compliance finally that you do with the authorities is accurate and defensible, both.
Right. And what is this market for tax technology worth today?
So we believe the market for indirect tax technology is anywhere between $200 to $300 million.
In India
Indirect
only?
tax, yes, indirect tax. But we see that as a very, very big potential market. All of that market is not being served today. Players like us are now have entered the market. We are global players, and we're now serving some of our global customers here, but we're also onboarding a lot of Indian customers or Indian multinationals. So we think the market is at a phase where there is potential for market expansion. I think the big underlying trend is governments across the world are increasingly looking at simplifying direct corporate tax and focusing more on ensuring more consumption-based taxes. And that trend is not going to be any different for India.
Yeah.
So we see that as long as that continues, I think corporations will need to be continually to be agile in terms of managing that, and technology will play a very critical role in that.
And internationally, what would be the market worth of tax technology companies?
I would suspect it should be a $1.5 billion, $2 billion at least, in terms of tax technology, or maybe slightly more. We ourselves, we have a very strong tax technology business. Our overall tax technology business is around, of our total revenue, is about $1.5 billion is what our tax and accounting
Global
division
revenues?
does. Global revenues. So you can extrapolate that, and that involves content and various forms of technology, but you can extrapolate that and see how big the market could be potentially.
Right. And what would be the role of technology in ensuring GST compliance as far as the Indian market goes?
Very, very critical. Very, very critical. So, the government has made a very good endeavor to obviously simplify and create a common market. And from the government's perspective, as you know, the GST network or the system is going to be set up, which will be the system into which all entities will have to comply with and file their returns into. The system of so there's a fair amount of technology will be required because a couple of things. Number one is that the changes that customers have to do in their systems to ensure that the new place of supply rules, the new rates are suitably incorporated, and make sure that transactions are correctly being computed from a tax perspective. That will need technology change very critically. The second is compliance is a very critical element of GST because with both the customers, filing returns, the suppliers also have to file returns, and customers will need to work to make sure that there's a fair degree of reconciliation between both those filings to ensure that they are getting the right input tax credit and their returns are in line with what is in line with their business growth and so on and so forth. So I think what this will mean is customers will need to really relook at their technology landscape, right? And really one of the important aspects of the GST transformation journey for most corporations, a very critical aspect will be the technology aspect as to how do they accurately capture the new rules and ensure that their systems consistently apply those rules.
Right.
And customers also have challenges around having multiple systems. You might have ERPs, you have certain other billing systems that you have implemented. We've seen customers with sometimes have 5, 7, 10 systems, and in each of those tax is determined today. It is physically not possible for them to go and make changes to all of the systems and build all the logic required for GST into those. And which is where we see a lot of customers now being receptive to what we call as a tax engine, which is a very central platform which connects to all these source systems, has the inbuilt logic and rules, has updated content, and then ensures that transactions get, the right taxation is applied on all of the transactions, and then we get much better compliance that way.
Right, but then with GST being so much in the development stage still, how ready is your technology?
Yeah, so our technology is we have a global platform, so it is being used in number of countries across the world. We serve multinationals which sit across multiple geographies. the engine has the basic logic built in already, and what we really will be doing is will be to adapting that or modifying that to suit the GST requirements. Now, as you know, the GST requirements are evolving. When the final rules come out in November, we'll have the final set of rules, and we have the Model Act out, and we can look at that, and we can look at some of the other information that's coming out from the government, and we're leveraging that to kind of modify a platform to ensure that it is available in time for our customers to consume and use.
Right. And for doing this, do you have any tie-ups with, say, SAP systems, Tally?
Yeah, so we as a company, we're a very open architecture kind of company. So globally, I wouldn't, the way I would describe it is that our system currently talks to all the leading ERPs across the world, right? And where it's been deployed across the world, it's connected to the leading ERPs, and we have connectors built into those ERPs. And most customers find that as a compelling value proposition as well, in addition to the fact that the engine does content and also does the rules. And for some of the localized or local Indian ERPs, we will be evaluating based on our customer base which ones they need to connect to. Very recently, we also launched the developer community, which will be can develop from our systems and integrate it with other platforms across the world. So, for example, if you have multiple platforms in an ecosystem and a software, how a company wants to develop adapters to those systems, we will be opening out APIs which will allow them to connect to those platforms. So that makes it quite open to integrate with a number of applications across the board.
Right. And as far as the speedy implementation of GST goes, what are the challenges you think India still faces on both the sides, the government as well as the taxpayers?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few challenges, right? So the first big challenge is the scale challenge is the biggest challenge in my view. Because at any point in time, numbers are between 8 million to 10 million people, 10 million entities will have to, come as part of the GST network and ensure that their returns are kind of filed. Clearly, the government is racing against time to ensure that the technology is tested and made available. A lot of training has to be imparted to the government officials. A lot of thought leadership and training has to be imparted to the ecosystem. While the larger firms and larger corporations have advisors and advisory firms helping them, a large part of SMEs and mid-market companies and smaller firms will not have the luxury of having advisors, but they will need to understand how the rules need to be implemented. So that, I think, is a very big challenge to make sure that everybody understands that. And those are some of the things that at least I can see from the government's perspective. On the corporate side, I think there are multiple challenges. It depends on which sector you kind of work with. Most of them have already done the GST impact analysis to some extent to understand what the impact is on their cash flow and so on and so forth. But I think they're now this is where the real action starts, where they have to kind of sit down, look at the entire supply chain, look at their entity structure, get advice from advisory firms or in-house as maybe, to kind of understand as to what the impact is. Secondly is make sure that where optimization can be done, should be done as part of the supply chain, because there could be some optimizations that could be done because there were different drivers to set up supply chains the way it were earlier, and they might be able to optimize in some places or rejig in some places, as the case may be. Net, they have to take a very holistic view of what the impact across the supply chain is, across the entity structures that they have. And the third aspect really is to really see what changes need to be done to ensure that they are not only compliant on April 1st, but what are other source system changes that may need to be done to ensure that they can be consistently compliant through the GST journey. And again, this is not a journey that will start at April 1st and will not change for the future. This is going to change, right? Rates are going to change, rules may change, and they have to create a dynamic technology platform or infrastructure that is geared to handle those changes going forward. So I would look at it kind of a in those two phases are the two critical phases for corporations to go through.
And wouldn't your technology have to be customized to the industry?
I think yes. I would answer it in two parts. So one is that we build content sets for various industries, right? So when I mean content sets, is the two kinds of content sets. Is one is what rates apply to what kinds of goods, right, or services, and that to a great extent remains consistent for different industries, right? If you're an auto industry or you're in electronics or different industries. The most important thing we have to actually do when we implement this platform is really map out the taxability matrix of that particular organization and ensure that that is captured into our tax engine configuration. And that is really not customization, we call it configuration.
Right.
Yeah. So the value proposition really is that we have an out-of-box content, we have an out-of-box rule engine. But when we come and implement it in a particular company, then that particular company has a certain supply chain, a certain applicability of tax based on where it operates and so on and so forth. And we work along with the tax team in that company to configure it so that that is consistently applied across the company.
And last question, how much do you think India is worth for you? In terms of market worth? For Thomson Reuters?
Yeah, I mean, see, I wouldn't want to put a number. So, I mean, the way I would characterize it is that, we've been in India for 160 years plus, right? So we have a strong legacy in India. We started a lot of, mainly through the news bureau of Reuters News. We started a commercial business in, I think, about 81. We serve a large number of banking and financial institutions and a large number of corporations across the country. So India is a very, very strategic market for us because we see different parts of the business landscape where Thomson Reuters can come in and play a role. In the financial markets, we have invested a lot in terms of building risk-related capabilities, whether it's operational risk, whether it is managing your supplier risk. So that is going to add to what we already do. We have a big role to play in ensuring that transactions in number of in foreign exchange and various other markets are enabled by using our platforms in India. We also have a very strong legal business where we serve law firms and we serve corporate counsels and then we have a tax business which we launched a couple of years back.
That's right. Was it in anticipation of GST?
I think we always knew that as part of our strategic planning, we knew that at some point in time GST was supposed to come because, as you know, it's been in the making for almost 10 years now. But also there was a strong belief that the multinationals in India had gone up to such a large scale that they were truly operating in different countries, multiple countries across the world, and they would benefit from the same expertise that we deliver to the Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 companies headquartered in US or UK. And there was a strong belief that those companies would benefit from our expertise and technology. And I think that's been proven true. I would say GST has now provided further, fillip to our plans and also makes us feel further, have greater conviction that this market has a very, very promising future and we'll have a strong role to play in that.
Right, sir. We wish you all the very best and make India's corporates tax compliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.